All right, everybody, let's talk about what's going on in your table here. You want to have 4 or 5 criteria, and at least one of those has to be your dependent variable when you do your table. So let's talk about a couple different ways to do a dependent variable, and what should that p-value look like for the dependent variable, because you've got to give me a p-value that makes sense. So one way to think about this and how do you get this criteria, how do you figure out what the criteria should be? Well, in your literature review, right, I'm going to want you to tell me what is the research evidence that shows that therapy A, right, that the language therapy is effective, and what's the evidence to show that the motor therapy is effective. And then, I want you to list some articles that say, hey, this article found it was effective, this article found it wasn't, or whatever. But use those articles, go to those articles and see what their criteria were as far as, what was important to include in the study. And, you can kind of use, maybe there's one article that you can really use as a template for your method section, but, especially maybe the criteria section as far as what goes here. So let's talk about doing let's talk about doing a standardized test first. So let's say you use, so I'm going to go to the data analysis slides that we had, right? So remember this part with the standard deviation and the normal curve, right? So if you're using a standardized score, any score between 85 and 115 is within the average range. So, for our pretest, right, we don't want to take people generally who are already within normal limits. We want to go down to maybe around 2 standard deviations below, maybe between 3 and 2 or just above 2. So, thinking about scores somewhere between 55 and 75 or something is good sort of average scores if we're using a standardized test. All right. So, and if we're thinking about that, number one, and then remembering that, right, in our method section, we want groups to be equal at the beginning, right? We don't want groups to already be different. So we're going to want those scores to be pretty equal when we're talking about our dependent variable and the other scores, because we want to show at the beginning of therapy things were equal, and then because of our therapy, that's when things got different. So I think it's a good idea. Go into Google Docs and make yourself a little spreadsheet. So let's say we're doing a standardized test, right? And then here are your 10 participants in therapy A. Here are their scores. I just kind of made these up, right? So 70, 71, 72, 73, 75. So I'm going for like low 70s here. So and then 68, 70, 72, 74, and then maybe 167. And then I'm going to make therapy B just a little bit lower, thinking about what that looks like. This is also, I think, just helpful for you to try to visualize what your dependent data would look like, right? So let's go ahead and do that as far as our study. So let's go ahead and go to our home page here, our As You Learn page, and scroll way up. And let's go to, right, we can do a t-test, right, because we're doing a Goldman-Fristow. So we've got independent data. So that is going to, or not independent data, right? We've got interval data. So that's going to work. So I'm going to copy my therapy A. Whoop. Edit, Copy. Remember, these are just numbers I made up that I wanted averages to be in the low 70s, but if you want averages to be in the high 60s or whatever, and you can play around with this a little bit. And again, I think it's a good idea. So we're going to come down here, and we're going to paste that in, edit, paste. All right, then we're going to paste in group 2, data, edit, copy. And I'm going to paste that in there. Right. So I've got my things, right? It's going to be unpaired, right? Because it's two separate groups. It's not like pre-test, post-test where it's the same people. So we're going to go, and I'm just going to calculate now. All right, so first let's look down here at the means. So the mean of group 1 was 71.2. Mean of group 2 was 69.3. So did a pretty good job of keeping them pretty equal, I think. So let's look up the p-value, though, is 0.08, right? So it's not statistically significant, right? So it's not significantly different because it's not 0.05 or below, right? But wow, that's actually pretty close to the being significantly different already. So, you know, I thought I was making them pretty close, but maybe not. So let me go backwards here. Oh, good, it kept our numbers. I was worried it would get rid of them. So let's actually make group 2 a little, actually, let's make group 1 a little lower. So let's drop these scores. And then all of a sudden, hopefully, right, drop every score by 1 here. I think I'm dropping them by 1, am I? I don't even know anymore. Let's pretend we're doing that, though. We'll keep that one the same. All right, now let's calculate. So now I think I've made it more similar. Let's calculate now. Yes. All right, so now we're at a p-value of 0.27. So that's actually looking really good. With that, we've got means of 70.3 and 69.3. So we're going to pop that into our spreadsheet, right? So let's say we did the Goldman-Fristow test of articulation 3. And so group 1, right? What did we say we had for group 1? That was a 70.3. So again, I'm just playing around. I'm just popping numbers in. I think this was 69.3, right? And my p-value, and I only need it for this one, right? P-value was 0.27, right? Which tells us that groups are not different, right? Groups are the same, which is what we want for our table, right? Because we're going to say that groups are equal at the beginning, right? So let's say we're not going to really worry about the DOS score. Let's pretend that's not there. But right here are, now we've got our average scores in each group, and then we've got our p-value, which says that the groups are equal, right? There's no difference between groups at the beginning because we want to see if there's a difference between groups at the end, okay? Now, let's say you wanted your data your data is not a standardized test. Let's say your data is number of articulation errors. So let's say in your research you found that maybe around 20 articulation errors. Maybe we're going percentage of errors. So maybe 20% is kind of a lot. So we'll start out 20, 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, and then we'll go back to maybe 18, 16, 14, how many is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then maybe we'll do 12 errors. Maybe we want therapy B to be almost the same. We'll go 19, 19, let's say 19, and then we'll go 18, 17, 16. So we'll give them 20, 18, 15, and 14. And let's see what we get here. So we'll copy that, edit, copy. Again, it helps you look at what you think your data will be, and you're going to learn a lot from your dependent variable by thinking about what that data would look like. So we're just going to paste right over that to give us that, and then we'll go back to our spreadsheet, and we're going to go here. Let's see what we got. Again, we might have to redo this because I don't know what this is going to tell us as far as are we different or not. So edit, paste. So remember, if we're doing percent of errors, right, we're still good. We've still got interval data, so we can still do a t-test. So I'm going to calculate that. Ah, look at that. Perfect. So we've got a p-value of 0.32. So things are not statistically significantly different, right? The two groups are equal, right? So we can come in, we can go here, so we can get rid of that, and let's say we're doing percent errors, percent articulation errors. All right, and maybe we can even make that a little bigger, get that on the same side. All right, now, so what was our data? So our p-value was 0.32. Right, so we'll put that in here. Right. And let's go and look at our actual means. So 16.5 versus 17.5, right? So we're going to pop that right in here. Versus 17.5, right? Again, we only need, the only p-value we need is for that dependent variable, right? So let's just go up here and just replace that, maybe edit, well, you know what I mean. So just pretend that one's not there. So really that's how we're going to get our data and what that p-value should be, right? So we want a higher p-value. We don't want 0.05 or below, because that would suggest these groups are already different at the beginning of the study, and that's not what we want. We want the groups to be the same at the beginning, and then because of our independent variable, that's when we would want to see them different at the end, but we haven't done our study yet, right? We're presenting our literature review and our method section for review here to see if we can do our study. So we're just putting in sort of expected pretest data to say this is what we expect our data to look like at the beginning, right? Okay. Let me know if that was helpful or not, and have a great day.